Today, we're going to be talking about what we have learned from the Chicago Bulls as the NBA season closes down. We're also going to be talking about some of the surprises this year that we learned from the Chicago Bulls as well. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Matas Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about what we have learned from the Chicago Bulls as the season closes down. We're also going to be talking about some of the things that were a surprise this year, along with just really some of the main questions remaining here with this team as we get ready to head into the offseason. And so I wanted to go ahead and start with the things that went well for the Chicago Bulls. And I think that the first thing that we saw this year is growth. And so I think that we saw some growth here starting with Josh Giddey. I think that he certainly took a step forward this year. When you look at the points per game, that went up to 17.4. And then also, too, when you look at the assists this year, those also went up to 9.2 assists, up from the 7.2, and then the rebounds as well. And so 8.4 rebounds compared to the 8.1 rebounds in year one with the Chicago Bulls. The three-point percentage was close. 37.8% last season for Josh Giddey, 36.6% this season. The free throw percentage almost identical, and so 78.1% last season, 77.2% this year. I think that that's something that Josh Giddey's still going to have to get better at. And the field goal percentage right there as well. So 46% last season, 45% this year, and the minutes have gone up a couple minutes this year as well. So look, I think that with Josh Giddey, he talked about it at the end of the year, talking about, look, he's going to be the player that we saw at the end of the year. And so I think that he certainly held up his end of the bargain. You would want to see him playing some more games. You know, obviously he ran into some injuries this year with the hamstring and everything else, but I don't think that that's going to be a situation you have to worry about moving forward. But he certainly took a step forward, you know, with the points per game. We talked about it with the assist and everything else. And I think defensively, you know, he definitely took a little bit of a step forward there. He's still got ways to go there, but I thought that the effort level was there, just like it was towards the end of last season. And so you saw some growth from him. Next up, Matas Buzelis. And so I think that Matas Buzelis took another step forward this year. We talked about it before with the block shots, the fact that he got over 100 block shots, and then also too the amount of three-point shots that he knocked down this year. And so he showed the growth as a three-point shooter. He shot 35.9%. He still got 8 games to go, close to the 36.1% that he shot a season ago. With the points, look, he went up another 8 points, and so up from 8.6 points to 16.4. I thought that that is good production for a second-year player. You know, you would love to see him get into the 20s, but the fact that he is doing this in year number 2, Matas Buzelis showing us that he is certainly a solid starter in the NBA. The rebounds up to 5.7. This is something that I talked about the last couple post games. I think that he should be getting to the double figures in that. And so I think that he could be, you know, a player that gets to 10 rebounds. I think that he could be easily a double-double player that way. The assist up just 1, and then the block shots to 1.5 this year. And so showing us some rim protection. And look, he played in a pretty good amount of these games. And so 73 games played. You love that with Matas Buzelis. He would have loved to play in all the games, but he got injured as well. And so Matas Buzelis showing us some growth. I think that, look, he's still got to get to the point where he's attacking the basket a little bit more, needs to get to the mid-range and things like that. But I'm liking what I'm seeing down the stretch here with him being assertive. And Matas Buzelis is the type of player that wants to build off of that. He talked about wanting to be coached hard this year, and I think that he's really met the challenge here. And so very happy with what I saw from both of those players. You know, these are two players that AK and the front office have talked about that they want to build around. And so I think that both of these players certainly did their thing here in year 2. And you have to love the fact that they did this with the team just pretty much being torn apart and just having to learn new teammates and things like that at the NBA trade deadline. Next, I got to give a shout out to Trey Jones and then also to Jalen Smith. I think that both of those players took off here in year number 2 with the Chicago Bulls. I think that Jalen Smith has certainly shown us that he can give us the rim protection. He's a great rim runner. He'll knock down the three-point shot. And also, too, look, I like the fact that you can play him at multiple positions. And so you can play him at the center, you can play him at the power forward as well, and he'll be just fine. I mean, heck, you might even be able to slide him out there to the small forward position if you need to, if you're trying to maybe present some matchup, just kind of nightmares to the opposite team, because he is comfortable handling the basketball too a little bit. And so, I think that Jalen Smith really showed the versatility with Trey Jones. He just continues to show that, look, man, he makes winning plays for the Chicago Bulls. And I said this before, hey, he is not Lonzo Ball, but he gives you a lot of those qualities. And I think that that really made it comfortable for the Chicago Bulls to move on from Lonzo Ball. And so Trey Jones giving you, that type of effort on defense and offense. I think that several times during the season we heard there's 5 Trey Jones out there. And so going to be interesting in the offseason. I do think that with Jalen Smith and Trey Jones, I do think some teams are going to be interested here. Do the Bulls listen to offers? Do they make moves, especially if that would get them an additional pick? I'm not saying that it necessarily gets them a first round pick, but maybe that might be something that they have to do in order to move up a spot or two. Who knows? But that is something that we'll find out when the offseason hits. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and talk into something that I thought was probably a pleasant surprise for the Chicago Bulls and just not expected. And that is Leonard Miller. And so, look, I think that Leonard Miller, to me, has shown us that he is certainly a rotational piece that the Chicago Bulls can build with. I think that he's the player that really the Bulls would love to have in Patrick Williams with the production as far as hitting the rebounds, being able to score where you don't run plays for him, the amount of hustle that he gives you, just loving the fact that he wants to be coached up. And you can just tell that he's running with the opportunity here. And so to me, I think that the Bulls really found a pleasant surprise in that trade. No, he's not going to replace Ayo Dosunmu. That's not going to happen. But I do think that the Bulls have a nice piece here. And I think that this team starts to get very interesting depending on just really what the other moves are going to be working around, this younger talent here. And so the Bulls will have a decision with him. I know that they have a team option. I think that the Bulls should certainly go out there, just get him locked into a new deal and continue on with Leonard Miller. And so hopefully we see some more of him down the stretch these last 8 games or so. And so I like the fact that even in a tough situation in this last game against the Memphis Grizzlies, where he had to play out of position, he still played with a lot of effort and still gave you everything that he had, and showing you that he's a player that you can depend on to either start or come off the bench. That's exactly what you want from a rotational piece. And so next, talking about, I think, one of the biggest surprises that happened this season. And I'll start with just going into one of the trades that happened at the NBA trade deadline. And that was the trade to move on from Nikola Vucevic. And so, look, we had talked about this, and I thought that what was going to happen in that situation was that the Bulls were going to go ahead and they were going to offer him a team-friendly deal, and then they were going to move him in the offseason, much like they did with Lonzo Ball, and it was going to be a player-for-player swap. I thought that the Bulls were going to continue on to that. But the fact that the Bulls not only moved Vooch for a player in Anthony Simons, but they also got picks back. And that's something that reportedly was not out there as far as getting picks back for Vooch. And so very surprised that the Bulls were able to get that done. Don't get me wrong. I think that this is something that had to be done at some point. But the fact that the Bulls did get, draft assets back and they got a decent pick back, not decent pick, but a decent player back that perhaps they could bring back to the roster. I got to give the Bulls a lot of credit for making that trade, because I didn't think that that was something that was going to happen. So I thought that that was a surprise. Next, I think another surprise for me, and I think just for really a lot of Chicago Bulls fans out there, was just the fact that they moved on from Ayo Dosunmu. And so, I talked about the potential of this possibly happening with Kobe White and him, but I thought that Ayo Dosunmu would be the player that would be the most likely to stay because his contract, it was the least. Like when you look between the two, between Kobe and him, I thought that, look, for Ayo Dosunmu, he was probably going to get the least amount of money when you go ahead and re-sign him. And he was on a very good team-friendly contract. And just really with what he was doing off the bench and everything else, like I would have loved to keep Ayo Dosunmu. I think that he certainly would have re-signed with the Chicago Bulls. I'm not sure that that's going to happen here, even though he does have a chance to, possibly come back if he wanted to. But I don't think that that does happen. Let's see what happens there. But I think that that was probably the biggest surprise to me, is the fact that the Bulls elected to move on from Ayo Dosunmu. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about just really the biggest questions that we have about the Chicago Bulls moving forward, going into the offseason. And so I think number one, it's the shakeup around the front office, and then also to the rumors around Billy Donovan. Like I want to see what that is going to really shake out to be, because look, you need to have your front office in place and on the same page when it comes down to drafting, in this upcoming NBA draft. Because look, if the Bulls are not on the same page there, they're already going to be setting themselves back for the upcoming season. And so I wonder, if we do get a solution here around the front office, if there's changes made going into this upcoming NBA draft. And then also too, I think the same could be said about the coaching situation. And I'll say it again, with Billy Donovan, he is not responsible for putting these rosters together. He is not a coach that they hired to just go out there and say, hey, just tank and everything else. Billy Donovan is a winner. He has been a winner at the college level. He was a winner with OKC. And when you look at the rosters and just the way that this thing has been constructed, it has not been in the best situation there for Billy Donovan. And I get it with the in-game, just adjustments and all this other stuff like that. I get it. All coaches are flawed, but still, you have to give him a ton of credit there. And I don't think that he is necessarily the biggest issue here. I think that really, if I had the choice between the two, if I had to get rid of, people in the front office or Billy Donovan, I think that I would start there with the front office, because like I said before, I think that the organization really changes from the top to the bottom, not from the bottom to the top there. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you're thinking there. And lastly, I think one of the bigger questions is going to be certainly around what the Bulls are going to do in free agency. And so with Colin Sexton, he continues to draw a lot of buzz because he's scoring off the bench. And yes, he would be that scoring guard that you would want. Just going back to Ayo Dosunmu, that is one of the things that he did well, is that he scored off the bench. And then also too, just with the mindset that both of those players have, I think between Colin Sexton and Ayo Dosunmu, just the way that they play, just wanting to get after you on the defensive end, trying to pump up the teammates and stuff like that. Like, you love that. You would want to have that with Chicago. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with Colin Sexton. Also too, what are you going to do in the front court? Do you keep Nick Richards in the front court there? I think he would be a very good backup center for you. Also too, you still have Zach Collins to think about, this Jaden Ivey situation in which you traded for him, and the Bulls can go ahead and they can pick up the restricted free agent option there, or they can go ahead and just release him, out into free agency, depending on what they decide to do there. So I think that that is going to be interesting. We talked about it briefly with Anthony Simons there. Do the Bulls want to go ahead and pay him to come back and be, possibly a starter for you? I talked about the fact that defensively that backcourt would really struggle there. So I'm not sure that the Bulls would want to necessarily do that, but a lot of questions coming here for the Chicago Bulls with all these free agents. You also have, just the rumors around the coaching, and then also to the possible shakeup here in the front office. And so we'll find out all about that. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking as far as your biggest questions heading into the off season. Also, to let me know what your biggest surprise was. Like I said before, I think that just going back to trade season, thinking about Ayo Dosunmu, who I thought would still be here, and then also to Nikola Vucevic, I thought that he would also still be around as well. but the Bulls were able to move both of these players. For Vooch, they got some picks back, which there was reports that there would not be any picks coming back to the Bulls until that happened. They also got a decent player back as well. And then with Ayo Dosunmu, that certainly hurt because I think that the Bulls, certainly could have kept him. And, but then again, we wouldn't have Leonard Miller here. And so you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking about Leonard Miller, the potential that he has moving forward, and also, too, what do you guys think is as far as the growth that we saw from some of these players that the Bulls are looking to build with, talking about Trey Jones, Jalen Smith, Matas Buzelis, and also, too, Josh Giddey. And so, look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.